live today, I guess. Before I left it on private to kind of just test it, test it out. But um, so to recap, we're at the doctor's opinion, part two for our purposes, but there's no actual part two in the book. It's just one thing. Um, so recapping, we believe, and so suggested a few years ago, that the action of alcohol on these chronic alcoholics is a manifestation of an allergy. That the phenomenon of craving is limited to this class and never occurs in the average temperate drinker. These allergic types can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. Just says safely use alcohol. So beer, wine, liquor, right? They can never safely use alcohol in any form at all. And once having formed the habit and found they cannot break it, once having lost their self confidence, their reliance upon things human, their problems pile up on them and become astonishingly difficult to solve. Frothy emotional appeal seldom suffices. The message which can interest and hold these alcoholic people must have depth and weight. In nearly all cases, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves if they are to recreate their lives. So, this is like where it starts to be a little bit more blatant in terms of power greater than yourself, whatever that is. Okay. Some examples you'll hear in meetings is GOD, group of drunks. Okay. So a meeting, a group of people. One time my sponsor asked me, he said, do you think you could kick my ass in a fight? So I would never do that. And he goes, hypothetically. I was like, yeah, if it was just you and me and I really had to, yeah, I'm sure. He goes, no, what about me and Jim over here? Could beat both of us up? I was like, he said, come on, dude. We're both old men. I was like, I guess, right? Yeah, sure. He goes, what about me, Jim, and Bob? It gets harder. What about this first row here in this AA meeting? Could you beat all of our asses at once? I was like, no, probably not. He goes, no, what about the whole room? Could you beat all our asses? And USA. And I said, no, definitely not. He goes, well, this is a power greater than you, this room. Okay, that made sense. I didn't really have issues with the higher power deal, but it was a good point, to remember for future use if needed, So this is where it starts to get a little bit more blatant about what it's saying. A power greater than themselves would be needed if they were to recreate their lives. If any feel that psychiatrists directing a hospital for alcoholics, we appear somewhat sentimental, let them stand with us a while on the firing line, see the tragedies, the despairing wives, the little children. Let the solving of these problems become a part of their daily work and even of their sleeping moments. And the most cynical will not wonder why we have accepted and encouraged this movement. We feel, after many years of experience, that we have found nothing which has contributed more to the rehabilitation of these men than the altruistic movement now growing up among them. Men and women, so now this just starts to really break it down. So men and women drink essentially because they like the effect produced by alcohol. The sensation is so elusive that while they admit it is injurious, harmful, they cannot, after a time, differentiate the true from the false. To them, their alcoholic life seems the only normal one. They are restless, irritable, and discontented until they can again experience the sense of ease and comfort, which comes at once by taking a few drinks. Drinks which they see others taking with impunity. Hello from India. Welcome. I'm reading about Alcoholics Anonymous, or I'm reading the book Alcoholics Anonymous. So, impunity, no harm comes to the other people, seemingly, right? They have a few drinks, they have a good time, they go home, they wake up the next day, they carry about their normal lives. Okay. And most importantly, they don't drink. Once they start drinking, they can control how much they drink. They can decide when it's time to stop drinking. Um, Our issue, if we're alcoholic, is that once we take a drink, we develop the phenomenon of craving, and we have little control over too how much we drink. All right. Um, so then, after they have succumbed to the desire again, as so many do, and the phenomenon of craving develops, they pass through the well known stages of a spree, emerging remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. So I don't know. Has anybody ever, it's not a recording, it's live. For the first time, I'm trying it out. Um, they emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. So I mean, I mean, if college, high school, people do that. They drink too much. They wake up the next day and they go, "God damn, what did I do?" I never want to do that again, right? But if and that happens, I think, to everybody, at least at some point in their life. If you drink, you have a crazy time and you wake up kind of like, oh, what happened last night? But for alcoholic people, that happens regularly, to the point maybe daily. Okay. So we develop the phenomenon of craving. We pass through the well known stages of a spree. We're drinking for a day, two, a week, a month, whatever it is. And then we emerge remorseful with a firm resolution not to drink again. And this is repeated over and over unless this person can experience an entire psychic change. So, unless this person can experience an entire psychic change, there's very little hope for his recovery. On the other hand, and strange as this may seem to those who do not understand, once a psychic change has occurred, the very same person who seemed doomed, who had so many problems he despaired of ever solving them, suddenly finds himself easily able to control his desire for alcohol. The only effort necessary being that required to follow a few simple rules. And this is where I left off on the last one. Rules as we keep going here, is steps, right? Um, the 12 steps, suggestions, right? But the doctor here, in the doctor's opinion, calls them rules, right? Not a Bible study. Alcoholics Anonymous, this book that was written, right, in 1939. Um, so the doctor says, men have cried out to me in sincere and despairing appeal. Doctor, I cannot go on like this. I have everything to live for. I must stop, but I cannot. You must help me. Faced with this problem, if a doctor is honest with himself, he must sometimes feel his own inadequacy. Although he gives all that is in him, it often is not enough. One feels that something more than human power is needed to produce the essential psychic change. So again, he references this higher power, something spiritual concept that will help the alcoholic to experience this psychic change. That's what he's calling it, to overcome the obsession for alcohol. All right. Though the aggregate of recoveries resulting from psychiatric effort is considerable, so the aggregate, like the total, so he's giving credit to psychiatry as a whole. He's saying, though the recoveries from standard psychiatric methods is considerable, we physicians must admit we have made little impression upon the problem as a whole. And again, this was written in 1939, all right? When the doctor first wrote this. Dr. William Duncan Silkworth um, wrote this about alcoholism and AA for the first edition of this book, which came out in 1939. Right. So today we have cognitive behavioral therapy, EMDR, um, dialectic behavior therapy, ACT. I mean, there's a lot of therapeutic methods out there. Exposure therapy, which in this case definitely wouldn't work for an alcoholic. Just have one beer a day, expose yourself to alcohol. That's the problem that we have, right? Is any exposures doesn't seem to work for us. So cognitive behavioral therapy is what I'm the most probably familiar with. And it's, looking at our thoughts and our actions, changing thoughts to try to, create new behaviors, new routines, new neural pathways for behavior, that type of thing. And that's like total layman explanation of that. But so now, 91 years later, a lot of psychiatric methods have are very well known and popular. Therapy is much more mainstream now, for any kind of issue that somebody has. I can't seem to watch a single podcast where they don't advertise better help. It's just like online therapy, basically. And whatever, dude, whatever works for people, I say, I'm all about it. Whatever works for you is awesome. But what this guy is saying about AA when this was written in 1939 is that though psychiatric effort has helped considerably, we doctors must admit that we've made very little impression upon the problem as a whole, alcoholism, worldwide. What is it? You know, why does it exist? How do we help these people that can't seem to stop drinking, no matter how bad the consequences get? They just find themselves drinking again. It's like lunacy. It's crazy, but it's not crazy because he's explaining that perhaps these people, alcoholics, are different in a sense that they have an allergy to alcohol. Now, allergy, we could dissect that, and we could poke holes in that all we want. But just for the sake of a simple definition, an allergy is an abnormal reaction to an otherwise normal food or substance. Okay. So peanuts, like if I get anaphylactic shock from peanuts, that's an abnormal reaction to an otherwise normal food, right? Millions and billions of people can eat peanuts. So if I can't, I have an allergy. If pollen, if I go outside and all of a sudden, my face is swollen, my eyes are runny, and I can't stop sneezing because of just pollen, there are millions of people that would be fine in the pollen, yet I can't go outside that day, or I have to take a bunch of allergy medicine because I have an allergic reaction to pollen. Cats, dogs, whatever. I have 3 dogs and a cat that comes around and hangs out with us, and we don't sneeze and we don't cough and we don't have an allergic reaction to animals, but some people do. So it would be an allergy, an otherwise normal food or substance. Okay. And with alcohol, it's an otherwise normal food or substance. I mean, billions, millions of people drink alcoholic beverages every day, and they don't react abnormally to them. Okay. But if you are an alcoholic, we come to this information and we go, maybe that's why. Maybe I react truly differently to this thing than my friends do, or than my wife does, or than my parents did. Right. So it's just something to consider. So the doctor goes on to say many types do not respond to the ordinary psychological approach for the problem of alcoholism. And we just named a few: CBT, DBT, EMDR, exposure therapy, one on one counseling. Those things aren't working for them. Um, and the doctor said, I do not hold with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. So that's a good point right there, right? Because even now, even today, if you have an alcohol or a drug addiction or any kind of, compulsive behavior, um, people just will knock it off, man. Just don't drink. Why don't you have any willpower, any self control? So the doctor's saying, I do not hold, or I do not agree, or I do not stand with those who believe that alcoholism is entirely a problem of mental control. I have had many men who had, for example, worked a period of months on some problem or business deal, which was to be settled on a certain date favorable to them. They took a drink a day or so prior to the date, and then the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. Okay. So to put that in like terms of, okay, we have a business deal that we're working on. The presentation is a week from now. We've worked on it for 6 months. For those 6 months, I haven't had a drink because I know I can get a little nuts when I drink. So I've really put that off. I've focused on this business proposal. And then 2 days before, it's all buttoned up. Everything's great. I know it. I have everything memorized. My presentation is locked in, and I go, well, I deserve to relax because I've worked for 6 months on this. I haven't had a drink. I haven't kicked back and whatever. So I decide, well, I could probably have a drink. Now, the phenomenon of craving kicks in, and I'm off to the races, as they say. So then the presentation date comes, and I'm drunk or hungover, and I blow it. And because I took that drink thinking I deserve to have a drink, I could relax. And the phenomenon of craving kick occurs because I've reintroduced alcohol into my system. That's how my system reacts to alcohol. Is I develop a craving for alcohol that some seemingly takes over my thinking, my thought process, to where I'm trying to overcome this craving by drinking more. And it and then it's a disaster, right? Because if you drink too much alcohol, no matter who you are, it's not going to be good. Okay. In my case, let's say, for example, if I have this allergy and I take a drink, I develop a craving. I drink more to try to overcome this craving, which I can never overcome. And then a bunch of bad shit happens because a bunch of bad shit would happen if you're drinking a lot of alcohol. And it doesn't matter who you are. But for me in particular, it's particularly bad because I respond differently to this otherwise normal food or substance, alcohol, because I have an allergy to it. All right. Then I start talking in circles, so I'm going to shut up. Okay, so they took a drink a day or so prior, and the phenomenon of craving at once became paramount to all other interests, so that the important appointment was not met. These men or women were not drinking to escape. They were drinking to overcome a craving beyond their mental control. Okay. There are many situations which arise out of the phenomenon of craving, which cause men and women to make the supreme sacrifice rather than continue to fight. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, and in much detail, uh, the classification of alcoholics seems most difficult and in much detail is outside the scope of this book. There are, of course, the psychopaths, right? Now, in this word terminology, it's like today we think of like a murderer or something, but in this terminology, a psychopath is someone who is emotionally unstable. That's the term that they're using here. So he's going to classify a few different types of alcoholics. Okay. And so psychopath who are emotionally unstable is one. We're all familiar with this type. They are always going on the wagon for keeps. They are over remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. Excuse me. So this person is emotionally unstable. Um, and that's not good or bad or right or wrong. It's just it is what it is, right? They're maybe super depressed or anxious or bipolar or some condition, right? So they're overly emotional, they're overly remorseful and make many resolutions, but never a decision. Okay. So this is one type. That first one is always kind of cloudy to me, right? Number two, there is a type of man who is unwilling to admit he cannot take a drink. He plans various ways of drinking. He changes his brand or his environment. That makes sense to me. Okay. I can identify with that. you know Liquor does this to me, so I'm just going to drink beer or wine. There's always like, if I change the type, tequila really fucks me up, right? So I'm not going to drink tequila ever again. I'm only going to drink Bud Light, right? It's like it doesn't matter what type of alcohol it is. If it's alcohol, if you're an alcoholic, you're going to experience an allergic reaction, which is the phenomenon of craving. Okay, so unwilling to admit he can't take a drink, he plans various ways of drinking. He changes the brand. I'm not going to drink whiskey. I'm going to drink beer. I'm not going to drink beer. I'm going to drink wine. I'm not going to drink wine. I'm going to drink White Claw, whatever the hell it is these days. Okay. So then, three, there is the type who always believes that after being entirely free from alcohol for a period of time, he can take a drink without danger. So I know these type of people too. They go 6 months or a year or 2 years even without drinking, and they go, see, I can control it. No problem. But then when they drink, things get out of control very quickly for a period of time. Okay. Yo, there's my cousin. What's up, brother? Um, he knows what I'm talking about. Anyway, there's the type that can not drink for a long period of time, but when they pick up the drink, they experience the allergic reaction again. Okay. So it's like if a diabetic is truly diabetic and they get their diet and everything dialed in and their blood sugar is perfect for 2 years, and they're like, dude, I'm not diabetic anymore. And they go and eat half a chocolate factory, all of a sudden, then their blood sugar's out of whack. It's because the diabetes wasn't gone. It just, the symptoms of it weren't present because we were doing certain things to control that reaction in our body. Okay. So when I drink alcohol, I respond differently. It doesn't matter how long I go without alcohol. In this case, right now, I'm at 18 years. Okay. And I think, and I mean, I believe that if I drank today, I would react the same way I did all that time ago, and things would get really messy really quickly. Okay. So that's the third type. There's the type that believes he can, after being entirely free from alcohol, he can take a drink without danger. And then four, there's a fourth type they mention here. There's the manic depressive type, who is perhaps the least understood by his friends and about whom a whole chapter could be written. So, manic depressive, today we would call that bipolar, right? Or whatever it is now, because they change the name like every 5 years. But extreme highs and extreme lows in mood and behavior, seemingly like people don't know why that happens, but it's a brain chemistry thing, right? Um, so then five, then there are types of alcoholics. There are types entirely normal in every respect, except in the effect alcohol has upon them. They are often able, intelligent, and friendly people. Okay, so that's like really, successful, happy, normal, regular guys, girls, whatever, family, kids, dog, house, job, business, whatever. And you look at them and you go, not depressed, not anxious, not sick, not this, seemingly normal in every way, except when this dude or gal drinks, they go off the rails. And, you know, we go, wow, he really knows how to party or whatever. But um, there's this type of person who's seemingly has no problems in life other than what happens to them when they drink alcohol. Okay. So all these and many others have one symptom in common. So no matter what type of this you are, right? If you're an alcoholic, we have one symptom in common. They cannot start drinking without developing the phenomenon of craving. The phenomenon, as we have suggested, may be the manifestation of an allergy, which differentiates these people and sets them apart as a distinct entity. It has never been, by any treatment with which we are familiar, permanently eradicated. The only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence, which means no drinking, no alcohol. And if it's opiates, and if it's cocaine, and if it's Xanax, and if it's whatever other substance, if you find you react in this similar way to that, then the suggestion would be not to do that substance. you know, if every time I eat peanuts, I almost die, then if I were to continue eating peanuts and I don't have a problem with peanuts, people would think I'm a little kooky, right? But if we could somehow see that I respond differently and I develop a craving for peanuts every time I eat them, that's beyond my mental control. Okay, well, that's something. He's not crazy. He has this mental and physical condition around peanuts. Let's figure out what that is, right? So they kind of that's what this is about with alcohol. Okay. This immediately precipitates us into a seething cauldron of debate. Much has been written pro and con, but among physicians, the general opinion seems to be that most chronic alcoholics are doomed. What is the solution? Perhaps I can best answer this by relating one of my personal experiences. Okay, so the seething cauldron of debate is about entire abstinence. Okay, so that's what he's saying. He's saying the only relief we have to suggest is entire abstinence, to not, in this case, drink alcohol in any form at all. And then he's saying that that kicks people into this crazy debate of like, moderation or self control or a medication to help how they, whatever, right? Great. Maybe there's a million ways to do this. Okay. Called spirits for a reason. Very good point. Um, so, what is the solution? And then the doctor's going to share a personal experience that he had. About a year prior to this experience, a man, and when you read this, right? Like if you're ever reading this book because you think you might be an alcoholic, the trick that it worked for me was I go, okay, where can I relate to what I'm reading? Okay. There's a lot in this book I don't relate to. Okay. And that's fine. Right. It's meant for that. It's like very broad to try to touch whoever, maybe you go, there's a one part about that one guy in the one section that kind of, okay, cool, man. Maybe that's all you need. It's just a little bit of where does this resonate with me? Rather than this whole fucking thing is a bunch of bullshit. I'm never going to read it. Well, it's like if you've been to treatment a bunch of times or DUIs or you get in trouble every time you drink, maybe check it out. Right. That's all I'm saying. Can't hurt you. So here's an experience the doctor had with a patient. About 1 year prior to this experience, a man was brought in to be treated for chronic alcoholism. He had but partially recovered from a gastric hemorrhage and seemed to be a case of pathological mental deterioration. He had lost everything worthwhile in life, and he was only living, one might say, to drink. He frankly admitted and believed that for him there was no hope. Following the elimination of alcohol, there was found to be no permanent brain injury. He accepted the plan outlined in this book. 1 year later, he called to see me, and I experienced a very strange sensation. I knew the man by name and partially recognized his features, but there all resemblance ended. From a trembling, despairing, nervous wreck had emerged a man brimming over with self reliance and contentment. I talked with him for some time, but was not able to bring myself to feel that I had known him before. To me, he was a stranger, and so he left me. A long time has passed with no return to alcohol. Okay. So he's saying, I had a patient who seemed like he was basically about to die. He was drinking, it seemed, he was living, only it seemed to drink. Okay. And if you've ever been there, you know what that feels like, right? Where you're existing only to get off E, right? To get unsick, to get a little buzzed for the day so that you don't feel like hell. Okay. So that guy accepted the plan outlined in this book and returned. And the doctor was like, bro, I don't even, I mean, I know it's you, but that's it. I mean, I can't. You're entirely different in every way. Okay. And I've experienced that, you know, where it's like the change in people is so profound that you're like, dude, I know you, but you're a totally different person in a good way. Okay, so then here's a second story that the doctor relates. When I need a mental uplift, I often think of another case brought in by a physician prominent in New York. The patient had made his own diagnosis and, deciding his situation hopeless, had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching part. No, this was not John Wilkes Booth. Okay, but anyway, stupid joke. Um, he had hidden in a deserted barn, determined to die. He was rescued by a searching party and, in desperate condition, brought to me. Following his physical rehabilitation, he had a talk with me in which he frankly stated he thought the treatment was a waste of effort unless I could assure him, which no one ever had, that in the future he would have the willpower to resist the impulse to drink. His alcoholic problem was so complex and his depression so great that we felt his only hope would be through what we then called moral psychology, and we doubted even if that would have any effect. However, he did become sold on the ideas contained in this book. He has not had a drink for a great many years. I see him now and then, and he is as fine a specimen of manhood as one could wish to meet. I earnestly advise every alcoholic to read this book through, and though perhaps he came to scoff, he may remain to pray. William D. Silkworth, MD. Duncan is his middle name. All right, William Duncan Silkworth, who didn't originally sign this in the first edition. He didn't want his name attached to this, although for it was it was a very new kind of um, thing at the time, right? So nowadays, if you have a new idea about anything, they call you a pseudoscientist and cancel you on the internet by calling you a racist or something, right? So maybe that's what he was afraid of in his time, his era of that type of thing, right? I have this new idea. I'm supporting this new idea of this process to help alcoholics. And all these doctors and psychiatrists may want to like ruin my career because it is new, and that's what humans do. We reject new ideas initially in a lot of cases, but over time this worked. We read the foreword to the first, second, third, and fourth edition, and it shows how this program was really embraced by society and all over the world. And so by whichever edition it was, I actually don't know, he did put his name on it. But that's Dr. William D. Silkworth. That's the doctor's opinion. William D. Silkworth was the doctor at Towns Hospital in New York, um, who met Bill. Okay. Bill Wilson. So when you're reading this, if you think you're an alcoholic, you go and you just look for, okay, what in this can I relate to? You know, um, when I drink, do I have little control over how much I drink and when I stop drinking? Yeah, okay. Well, then maybe I'm an alcoholic. Okay, cool. Maybe. And then we keep working our way through this book. Okay. And the other one that would go along with this book is the 12 steps. Okay. And this like really provides a lot more information about each individual step as you go through it. Right. So the way it was recommended to me was you read this one first, the first 164. I talked about this before. The first 164 is the program of action for Alcoholics Anonymous. And then in the back of the book, there's personal stories. So sometimes people jump to personal stories, which is fine. But I would say, this is where it's at right here. Okay. This is the shit we would need to do to, overcome the obsession and begin to have control over the impulse to drink. Right. Um, there, right? And then this is like, speaker meetings in text form, which are also very good. And there's a lot you can relate to this too, right? There's a lot you might read back here and go, shit, I did that, or I felt like that, or I thought about that. But for the sake of what we're doing here, is this was the conclusion of the doctor's opinion. Okay. So the doctor is saying he highly recommends that if you think you're an alcoholic, that you accept the plan that's outlined in this book. The next part is Bill's story. That's Bill Wilson. That's his personal story of what happened, what it was like, what happened, and then how he got sober and stayed sober, and became one of the founding members and one of the founders of Alcoholics Anonymous. So if you when you start drinking, if you have if you have a hard time controlling how much you drink and when you stop drinking, then maybe that's the manifestation of an allergy. Okay. Now we could dissect allergy and medical and all that bullshit, right? But it's an abnormal reaction to an otherwise normal food or substance. So if I eat peanuts and almost die, that's an allergy because it's abnormal. That doesn't normally happen. Peanuts shouldn't do that. If I eat a bunch of sugar and then my chemistry goes crazy and I start losing feelings in my feet and legs, then that's an abnormal reaction to sugar. And I got to take a look at my sugar intake and how I'm living my life and what I'm doing. And in a lot of cases, there's certain things I can do, there's certain protocols I can follow, um, and regiments I can undertake that will make my diabetes, in that example, look like it doesn't exist anymore. But I know if I get off this regimen and I just start consuming a bunch of sugary foods, my diabetic symptoms will come back. So the same idea applies to alcohol and alcoholism if you are an alcoholic. If when you drink, you can't control how much you drink or when you stop or what happens, and you seem to be like overcome by this obsession to keep drinking, you might be experiencing what they call in this book the phenomenon of craving. um, and if that's the case, the suggestion is entire abstinence, not drinking any alcohol whatsoever. Okay. Including, in my opinion, non alcoholic beer, because it'll tell you it has 0.05%. Right. So, how many of them bitches do I need to drink to catch a buzz? I don't know. I've never tried. But beer, wine, liquor, White Claw, orchards, fucking ale, IP, whatever, dude. Right, if there's a percentage in there, it could trigger the allergy that you may or may not have. That's up to you to decide. And that's the greatest part about the whole deal, is that ultimately you would have to say it. You would have to say, I have this craving shit that they're talking about. I react differently to alcohol than other people that I see drinking seemingly without any problems. That really pisses me off because I love to drink. Okay. Which do you love more? Living a happy, useful, fulfilling, content life that we could discover through this program, I believe, or to keep having, a few short windows of high excitement and crazy times, or relaxation, whatever benefit you feel like you're getting from alcohol. For me, I was 22 years old. Um, I drank to where when I didn't drink, I started having seizures. And that's when I realized, like, oh, yeah, you know, that's a big deal because I'm not epileptic. Okay. So uh, having a seizure and waking up in an ambulance, having peed yourself in front of a bunch of people, is not my idea, really, of a good time. So it was within a couple weeks of that incident that I decided to go to treatment. Um, but had that not happened, I would have continued on, I think, because I was trying to justify everything I could about why this was okay, why living like this was okay. And that's what the book says. It says, after a period of time, we're unable to differentiate true from false, and our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. So I was at that point by 22 years old, by April, May, by 21, technically, but I went into treatment and turned 22 in treatment. So, and it was there that I accepted, like the dude in the story, I accepted the plan outlined in this book, and I put the things that this book told me to do into practice, and my life got better, and my how I viewed the world got better, my perspective on life got better, how I felt about myself got better, how I felt about my past got better, everything, like the whole comprehensive package of being a human being got upgraded for me. So I've stuck with it. It worked for me, and it continues to work for me. So that's the doctor's opinion. Um, Check it out.